Hey guys, welcome to today's video. Today we're going to be going over linear relationships for your Australian Year 7 Maths curriculum. Now if you follow this video through to the end, you'll be able to get a A. Now this video is going to have 4 parts. First we're going to go over what an equation is and how that relates to linear relationships. Then we're going to go over what variables are. Third, we're going to go over how this graph here fits into everything and why this line is always straight. And fourth, we're going to go through some examples before we recap it all and make sure you guys have understood everything. So what is an equation? An equation is kind of just a bunch of mathematical writing that shows one side is equal to another. And so here we have 2 plus 3 equals 5, which is pretty obvious that's an equation. 7 times 8 plus 2 is equal to 58. That's an equation. And the one we're concerned with today is y equals mx plus b. Now that's an equation and it looks a little tricky. And to understand how this equation works, we're going to have to understand variables. So what is a variable, you're asking? Now, all of these letters in our equation are variables. Now that's because we don't know the exact value of them. So until we know it, they're variable, meaning they kind of can change. Well, all of these letters here in our equation are variables. This y, this m, this x, and this b. Now, for the purpose of linear relationships, m and b are known constants, so they just represent a letter that we already know, and they don't change with anything. So we can rewrite this equation with m with a number and b with a number because they're known constants. But y and x are variable, so they change with each other. However, if we were to make x, say, equal to 2, well then y would no longer be variable because it would have a strict answer or a value that we could work out. Now, understanding how these are variable actually ties into our graphing. So here we have a graph, and what this graph shows is an x-axis and a y-axis and a line. Now, this line shows if we were at any point on it, we could go to the y-axis and find out what our y value is. We could go back to the point, we could go to our x-axis and find out what our x is. And this line is actually represented by this equation. And all linear relationships follow this equation of y is equal to mx plus b. And in this case, m, the constant, is equal to 2, and b, the constant, is equal to 1. X and y are variable here. What m and b do is it changes how our linear line looks. Now let's start with b because it's the easiest to explain. B is plus 1, so we start at 1 on our graph, and m is equal to 2, so for every 2 up we go on the y, we're going to go 1 across on the x. Now the m and b are the only changing parts of this equation. And if you can understand that, you can make any kind of linear relationship you'd like. So let's go on to some examples now. So for our first example, there's not going to be any kind of worded question. I'm just going to give you what m is and what b is. And I'm going to want you to solve for the value of y when also given x. So say we have an equation where y is equal to a gradient that is multiplied by x, which is m, so it will be called the gradient. Now our gradient in this one is going to be 7. So we put 7x, and now our y-intercept, or our initial value of y, which is b, now that's going to be equal to 4. So when I tell you that, you should be able to recreate this linear equation and put in your m and your b, or your gradient and your starting point of y, which is sometimes called the y-intercept, and you'll get into that later. So now if I were to tell you that x was equal to 5, let's see what you'd do. You would rewrite your equation with y is equal to 7, and you would substitute in your x. So bracket 5, I think I said, plus 4. And now this is pretty simple. We can solve this now. So y is equal to 7 times 5, that's 35. Plus 4, y is equal to 35 plus 4, which is 39. And now, when we have our linear relationship like this, and we hear what the gradient is, and we hear what the y-intercept, or starting value of y is, and then we get told a random value of x, we can find the correlating value for y. So your x and your y are variables, because whatever number I pick for x, which is always changing, will change our value for y. So guys, in this example, you're going to be wanting to rent a bike in the city. So the initial cost of renting the bike is $3. So just to take the bike out, you have to give them $3. And then for every hour you're renting the bike afterwards, it's going to cost you $2 an hour. Now with this equation, we're going to try work out how much it would cost to rent this bike for 8 hours in total. So let's write our equation and we're going to try to figure out what that m and b, our gradient and our y-intercept, are using these words. And then we'll substitute in 8 for our x, and then we'll find out what y is equal to. So let's start writing our equation again. Y is equal to mx plus b. Now guys, this equation is just something you're gonna have to remember. At school, you're probably gonna do it so much it'll be drilled into your head and you won't be able to forget it. It's the equation for a linear relationship. Now we have an initial cost of $3. So our initial cost is actually our y-intercept, or what it starts at. So our initial value of y, and that's what b is equal to. So we're gonna have plus 3, y is equal. And then our gradient, every hour it's gonna cost us $2. So we're gonna have 2x. So now we know our equation is y is equal to 2x, and that 2, our gradient, our rate of change, okay? It is how much y is increasing for every one of x. So now that we have our equation, let's substitute 8 in for our x and see how much it's going to cost us to rent that bike for 8 hours. Let's try y is equal to 2 times 8 plus 3. Now 2 times 8 plus 3 is equal to 19. And I almost forgot, show your units of measurement. Otherwise, you're not going to get that A. It's 19 what? It's $19. So $sign. So guys, that's really it for linear relationships. Remember, what's an equation? It's something equal to something. What's a variable? It's x and y because they change with each other. They're varying, variable. M and b are variables. Now remember, we had to take our words and find out that b was equal to 3 and that m was equal to 2. And we should also remember that y and x can be plotted with a graph, and it's always going to be a straight line, y-axis, x-axis, and this is our relationship. This is what our equation shows, is this line. So if you can remember all that and do these examples, you should be on your way to getting an A for your Australian Year 7 Maths curriculum. If you learned anything in this video, please leave a like. If you want to learn something new, leave a comment. Otherwise, I do run a tutoring service. You can look at that in my profile. Visit the Calendly link. Thanks for watching. Have a great one. Bye.